Hi everybody, it is April and I'm in my craft room, and today, if you like free and shopping, this video is for you. So come on Jenny, let's escape into a new quilt pattern. So I was shopping in my easy chair, perusing through the Keepsake Quilting catalog. And I happened upon this absolutely free pattern. What goes better with shopping while you're sitting down than a free pattern? So this is a pattern for a chevron quilt, but instead of using those fussy half square triangles, we're going to cut out rectangles. In order to make this pattern, you need 16 different fabrics and you need a ½ yard of each of those fabrics. Evidently, I am on a timeless treasures kick, or I was when I bought this fabric. Let me show you the fabric that I'm going to use. Here is my fabric collection, and I've put it in the order that I'm going to make my chevrons. So it's going to move from lighter to darker. Now I have probably about a yard of most of these fabrics. There might be some that I've used part of, but I should at least have a yard left. And instead of cutting a ½ yard and then subcutting that, since I have more yardage, I am going to cut 3 7-inch strips from each of these fabrics. I am going to do some stacking, and evidently Maxine is going to help me. Let's do 4 at a time and see how that goes. So the first cut will just straighten out all the edges. Maxine, you are not helping. And I want to make sure that all right, 4-inch strips. If you are going to cut this much fabric, make sure you have a nice sharp blade. You might want to cut them in groupings of 2. 4 inches, they go together. Another way you might want to cut is to use your cutting mat. So if I lay out these next 2, I can line up on the 0 mark of my cutting mat, and then I can cut 4 inches using the marks on my cutting mat. So 4 and 4 is 8, so I use the 8 mark next, and then I have my fabric. So you choose the way that it works best for you, and we will meet back and look at the next step of our process. I want to give a shout out and say thank you for the coffee, Steph and Lynn's Sew Imperfect. So I've cut out all of my 4-inch strips, not 7, well I said 7 before, but my 4-inch strips. Okay, subcut those strips into 13 7.5-inch sections. That must be where I got the 7, which the 7 isn't right either because it's 7.5. Lay out as shown above and in figure 2 to audition the fabrics. You should have 16 zigzag rows using 12 rectangles each. As I was cutting these strips, I showed you 3 different ways that you can do it. My favorite way ended up being taking 2 of these strips and laying them out one above the other on my cutting mat and using my cutting mat. It just seemed faster. Stacking 2 fabrics, one on top of the other, that was just way too much fabric. So I'm sure that I didn't get as clean a cut as I did when I just had the individual fabric. All right, so I need to cut these into 7.5-inch strips. So I am going to stack them one on top of the other to speed up the process. I am probably not doing myself any favors by not pressing these. Okay, that's not too thick. That feels fine. All right, 7.5 is where I want to measure. I am going to use my ruler for this one. Measure once, cut twice. So I've got 7.5. Not pressing them. Not helping me. I want you to be able to see what happens when you stack your fabric too high. This piece of fabric, you can see this little jagged edge. So instead of being straight, I have these jagged edges because I tried to cut too much fabric at one time. I also want you to see how much easier it's going to be to cut out the fabric strips when they're nice and pressed. I used my favorite Faultless Premium Luxe Finish. Be really careful to just press your fabric. Do not iron it. So when you take your iron, you put it down and lift it up and put it down and lift it up and put it down and lift it up and put it down. That smooths out your fabric, but it doesn't pull it. If you tug, they're on the bias, so they are going to stretch, and that's what we want to avoid. So we've gone from this to this, and when I had 3 strips of one piece of fabric, I could get 15 7.5-inch cuts out of that. So I have some leftover fabric. I am supposed to take my 2 coordinating pieces and sew them together. And I'm supposed to do this for that whole big stack of fabric. Then I will press those 2 pieces and I will place them on my fabric wall, and we'll get to see what this quilt is going to look like. I have started laying out my blocks across the design wall. And as I was doing that, I realized I didn't quite read the directions fully. There aren't a whole lot of directions in my defense, but I am a skimmer by nature. I thought that I would take these 13 strips and these 13 strips, or rectangles, and I sewed them all together. No, no, no. They label each fabric with a letter. So you have A, and in my case, the butterfly is A. B, and in my case, this splatter is B. So I put A and B together. I did 13 of those. You do 6. Then you have fabric B with fabric C, and you have 6 of those. Then you have fabric C with fabric D, and you have 6 of those. I am going to go back and separate my pairs and stack them in alphabetical order. I think that'll make it easier. But regardless, there was some seam ripping involved. However, if you look, it looks really good. So I think I'm going to be very pleased when I get done. It's easy, but you have to pay attention. Or you might do like I did, and you might do some seam ripping. So let me get back to sewing my different A, B, C, D, E, F, G fabrics together, and I'll come back and show you what it's going to look like in the end. My quilt is on the design wall. Now what I need to do is I need to put my rows together, but my rows are at an angle. This is a row, and all the rows go that way. Everything is not perfect. Evidently, I cut some of my strips a little wider than 4 inches. When I was sewing the 2 strips together, one would be wider than the other. If I do this, you can see where there's fabric that sticks out. I'm glad that I cut them bigger instead of smaller. Now, I am doing 1 block at a time. So I'll go get a block or 2 blocks, sew them together, come back just to make sure that I do this correctly, because it is going to be uber obvious if my chevron isn't a chevron. I think that's it for now. Let me get this thing sewn together, and I think it's gonna look pretty cool. If you have not done a quilt on point, where you've put the rows together on a diagonal, this is going to seem strange, but it's okay. It'll all work out because, well, for me, I'm going to cut off the edge triangles. So it's just going to seem a little weird because you're going to start sewing here when it seems like you should be sewing at the top. But don't let it freak you out. It will all work out. You just sew your rows. My quilt top is done. It is nice and big, and Todd, my husband, has already claimed it. Now I do still have to cut off the triangle pieces that are on the edge, but I wanted to leave those so that you could see what it looked like, because you might want to bind it that way. This is all personal preference, but binding like this looks a little hard. I am at the Paducah Quilt Show. If you are here, stop by and see me. I don't know how you're gonna stop by and see me. If you are here and you happen to see me, please say hi. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Eat some chocolate and be kind to everyone. And the chocolate of the day today are Mom's famous chocolate chip cookies. Good. Out of each of these, is it really close?
Here's what I found.
What? Some of them I may have used some of it, but I should have a yard left. A half a yard. Now my 7-inch. Yeah, I already said it. I don't even want. Why do I need to say it again? Of the. That was it. Laying. Oh my goodness, I can't even talk. And then some of them, one side's the right side and the other side, one side's the right side. Some of the blocks have one side that's the right size and the other side, wow.